The 2025-26 Sky Bet Championship season is right around the corner, and I, for one, personally, am really looking forward to doing this video because as a neutral, I think this video will be very, very interesting to say the least. Before I get started, I know there will be a couple of questions in the comments about why aren't you doing a Premier League predictions video now Sunderland are in there, and to make this very, very brief, couple of reasons. One, because I feel I haven't watched anywhere near enough of the Premier League to give off the illusion that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to it. Secondly, because I'm going to do a separate video completely on Sunderland within the next week about how I feel we can, not necessarily will, but can survive in the Premier League, or reasons to believe we can do it. And the third reason is because I like talking about the Championship. I think it's an absolutely bonkers division, and although I hope we're not back in it in a year's time, there is the possibility we will be, of course, but I think it's just an absolutely mental league, and I absolutely love talking about it. As you know, on Carl's channel, we are going to continue, I believe we're going to continue anyway, the Championship season, the Championship reviews throughout the whole season, so I can't wait to get started on it. And as I said, the season is literally right around the corner, so here we go. So, let's get into it. My number 1 to 24 Championship predictions for the 2025-26 season. Little disclaimer before we do carry on. Don't be in a hissy fit if I put your club belower than what you would like them to be. I've done that before where I've looked at people who put Sunderland 15th, for example, last season, but that's their own opinion. You have to respect that, and quite frankly, the Championship is a near impossible league to predict, which is partly what makes it so much fun, in my opinion. So let me know in the comments below respectfully if you disagree with me and why you think I've got it wildly off the mark when it comes to certain clubs being in certain positions. So let's not waste any more of your time. Let's get right into it, and we will start with 24th. And I feel like this is going to be a very popular sort of choice, unfortunately. 24th, Sheffield Wednesday. To make it brief, I have a lot of time for Sheffield Wednesday as a club, as you guys know, ever since they were very, very classy with us when we beat them in the League One playoff semi-finals 3 seasons ago. And I have a feeling us beating Sheffield United in the playoff final might have endeared us a bit more to Sheffield Wed fans. But put it simply, I think their north stand is closed now. I think it's their north stand through issues with the stadium. They have lost a number of players. They have barely got a starting 11, I think, of experienced players. A lot of the 3 signings, what I can see here that they've made have been for the academy, which is Harry Evers, Coley McGee and Denny Oliver. The Jeff on Chance series, an absolute muppet, to put it bluntly. And I'm looking at players such as, okay, some of these I'm not exactly sure I'll rate for the Championship anyway, but look at Stuart Armstrong, Callum Patterson, Josh Windass, Michael Smith, Manic Wilkes, Michael Ahikwe. There's a lot of experienced players that have gone off the books. We know what's happened with Barry Bannon, how much he absolutely adores and loves Sheffield Wednesday, and the fact that that contract has only just been sorted out is an absolute disgrace. So let's get into the final thing on Sheffield Wednesday before I move on to the next one. Chancery, you are ruining a club that, in my opinion, should be challenging to go up to the Premier League. Sell as soon as possible, you absolute idiot. Right, 23rd, Hull City. This is an interesting one because I've seen a few Hull fans in comments and videos going, why are people putting us so low? When you look at the form table that they were in, I think there was something like top half for form since Ruben Sayers came in the second half of last season. But that in and of itself is a big problem. They sacked Ruben Sayers in a move that I think even some Hull fans were deeming as a little bit insane, to say the least. But if I'm looking at the head coach, so is it Sergei Jakirovic? I'm going to say that. Now, I know I'm going to say these wrong, so there you go. Pronunciations is never my strong point. Now, straight away, looking at the signings on paper, you got Gustavo Peretta from Bayer Leverkusen, who they seem to have spent a fair amount of money on, which looks to be promising if they're spending that much on someone who, bear in mind, a team that won the league year before last, but I don't know how long Peretta was actually there. I'm looking at Akin Famawu, I think is it, from Sheffield Wednesday, Dylan Phillips from Rotherham United, Semi Ajayi, who I actually think is a decent player at this level, Ollie McBurney, who, on the face of it, is a decent player, but is he past his sell-by date? I don't know. But the biggest thing for me is I just don't trust Hull's decision makers. With sacking, Liam Rosinha, which isn't necessarily it might not necessarily be the wrong decision in hindsight, but again, it's all hindsight, isn't it? John Lundstrom coming in on loan from Trabzonspor, I think it could be a decent one for them. So, in theory, they have some players that on paper should be better than bottom 3 Championship. But at the same time, I think that their decision, like I said, their decision making just isn't very good in my opinion. I just don't trust with what their owners are about. I think that they going through head coach after head coach, left, right, and centre, I think is utterly ridiculous. So yeah, we'll wait and see about it. And remember, they just were lucky to scrape, well, not lucky to some, but scrape survival on the final day last season. And you could argue if Luton's squad had a backbone about it, with the quality their squad should have done, Luton Hull would have gone down. Really, Hull's big chance was season before last, when they had the likes of Zavori, Carvalho, Delap on loan. I know Delap was injured for a lot of that season. Obviously, Ryan Giles, who they obviously signed permanently since. And when they had Philogene and Greaves still on the books, that was their chance to get promoted. And it looks like that not getting in the playoffs, at least, or not going up, has sort of set them back for quite some time. So, look, Hull's the one that I'm probably thinking I could be the most wrong about, and I might be totally wrong on that, but I'm just not convinced with Hull, so I think Hull will finish 23rd, but I wouldn't be surprised if they stayed up. Right, 22nd, we have gone for Preston North End. Now, last season I got the impression with Paul Heckingbottom that I think he was this manager last season that was sort of trying to adapt to the way that a Ryan Lowe trying to get a Ryan Lowe squad effectively to adapt to the way he wants to play. Now, Sheffield United, of course, the team he was at prior to Preston, obviously have a much better team than Preston do. But at the same time, I think they were quite, again, like with Hull, they were probably a bit fortunate that they'd got the points that they had done prior to the end of the season. When you look after the FA Cup quarter-final against Aston Villa, they dropped off a cliff, and it was thanks to really other teams not being able to make enough ground on them that they ended up staying up. Obviously, they've lost players like, say, Emil Rees, who was their main top goal scorer last season. Whatever your thoughts on him as a player, he did get double figures for them. I believe he was their highest goal scorer. Kesler Hayden at right back, who, to be fair to them, was on loan from Aston Villa. Obviously, has gone back to Villa before joining Coventry on a permanent basis. And Freddie Woodman, I don't know whether that was a mutual decision. Like with Reese, I don't know whether both of them were mutual decisions or not. I like the signing of Daniel Everson, whose contract expired at Bristol City, but I'm looking at some of the other ones. I'm looking at Paul Valentine from Sheffield Wednesday, Michael Smith from Sheffield Wednesday, Jordan Thompson from Stoke City. They're not exactly ones that scream to me that they're going to get any better, especially on top of having just lost their top goals, one of their top goal scorers, and I believe Kesler Hayden was their player of the season last year, so I like Preston. I've got an out against them, but I'm not convinced by their chances this season. And again, with every prediction, I might be wildly wrong on this, but I've just got a funny feeling that I can't shake off the end of last season out of my mind. And I just think, unfortunately for Preston, and they'll rightly hope that I'm wrong, I think they will get relegated. So 22nd, Preston North End. Right, now we're getting into the ones that are kind of the murkiest to sort of try to predict. But here we go. So 21st, I have got Oxford United. Now, I know that not the top 20, George Ellick, who I massively disagreed on with his assessment of Sheffield United and Sunderland and all that in the playoffs, but having said that, as an Oxford fan, he predicted them to get relegated. Now, or at least that podcast did. Now, for me personally, the biggest reason I've gone for them to survive, I'm not going to lie, is Gary Rowett. I'm looking at their business, and they haven't exactly been as active as what a lot of their fans, I imagine, would have liked. But when you look at the job Gary Rowett did at the end of last season, it's no surprise for me that Oxford ended up staying up. And I think that while their squad isn't the flashiest on paper, the biggest reason the players like, Cameron Brannigan, I think it's Pajetta, who they signed from Swansea, I think it is, or former Norwich winger. I might be wrong on that one, by the way. But I think Gary Rowett is the utter biggest reason why I believe they will survive. I mean, Will Lancashire, for example, is someone who's joining on loan from Tottenham, Luke Harris on loan from Fulham, and Nick Prelech on loan from Cagliari. Ignore my horrendous attempts to pronounce that. But the biggest reason for me is Gary Rowett. And while I appreciate that apparently their numbers at the back end of last season weren't great, I just think with Gary Rowett, I struggle to see Oxford getting relegated. Now, if he leaves, that changes. If he leaves, then that changes unless they have a really good appointment, an ace appointment up their sleeve. But as of right now, I would tip Oxford to finish in 21st place. In 20th, I have gone for the first of the promoted sides, League One playoff final winners, Charlton Athletic, who beat Leyton Orient 1-0 in the playoff final at the end of last season. One of the biggest reasons I've gone for them to stay up is Nathan Jones. And the biggest reason for that is because at a certain level, I actually quite like Nathan Jones. I think, obviously, look, he was dreadful at Stoke. He was appalling at Southampton. But the way I look at it is this. Stoke City, a lot of people have gone and failed there. And then you look at Southampton, he's just not going to cut it for the Premier League, is he? for a club like, say, Luton, for example, and then now Charlton, although I think Charlton are bigger than Luton, but one of the reasons for Charlton that I think he'll do well is that it's a massive sort of us against them sort of mentality and the togetherness and everything else that Nathan Jones embodies, in my opinion. And I think for Charlton, for this season, I think will actually suit it really well. This is obviously their first season back in the Championship after 5 years in League One, which for me, Charlton are too big for League One. They should be in the Championship. And I'm looking at some of the players now. The one that's obviously the most highly rated is Charlie Kelman from Queen's Park Rangers. Who apparently spent a fair amount of money in order to get. But I'm looking at signs like Reece Burke, Amari Bell, Thomas Kaminski from Luton. Now, I know Kaminski didn't have a great time at Luton, but I believe he didn't play but too badly for them in the Premier League, from what I can remember hearing. So, but the good thing is Nathan Jones will know some. Obviously, Kaminski wouldn't have been there when Jones was there, I think. But I just think that Nathan Jones just embodies like a scrappy, us against them sort of vibe and mentality, and will really get the backing of the players and the supporters. And obviously, they will have done after getting promoted. Don't be surprised if the Valley is a big factor if Charlton do stay up this season. But I think Charlton will be more than fine. So in 20th place, I've got Charlton Athletic. In 19th place, I have gone for what's becoming a bit of a sad meme at this point is Stoke City. Now, at what point are we going to stop having the same damn conversations about Stoke? It's Stoke for me, like I said, it is absolutely criminal that since, if I'm correct here, since Stoke got relegated in 2018 to the Championship, not once have they been in the top half, let alone compete for a playoff place. That is utterly disgraceful. And the decision makers at Stoke, and I believe is it Jonathan Walters, I think is the director of football there, or at least was. I don't know whether he still is. But either way, that is not good enough. And I think it's one that on paper, Mark Robins seems to be a decent manager on paper. And obviously, the caveat with him, with Coventry at least, was that he always started slowly, and that ended up costing him his job last season. But the problem with Stoke is it's the same cycle over and over again, where, say, a head coach starts the season, starts poorly, gets sacked, a new one comes in, initial honeymoon period, then has a bit of a wobble before a late season surge to stay up, and then the cycle repeats itself all over again. Having said that, if you're looking at some of the transfers they've done, Aaron Cresswell from West Ham on a free, probably nowhere near what he was, but I suppose if he would, he wouldn't be in the Championship. Sorba Thomas from Huddersfield. Could Stoke not do a bit better there? I'm not sure. The one that I'm interested to see is Divin and Barmer on loan from Man City. Now, Sunderland, my club, obviously were linked with him a year ago, and I'm interested to see how Divin and Barmer does at a club where he will be expected to probably play a lot of games, I would imagine. The big thing for Stoke is they're just missing Tom Cannon. Tom Cannon was carrying that team at the end of last season, and in some senses, you could say Mark Robins did really well to keep Stoke up, given that they didn't have as regular as goal scorer of his ability in the Championship. But that's because I really rate Tom Cannon. I do think Stoke will do enough to stay up, but ultimately for them, for the length of time they were in the Premier League, that isn't good enough for them. Mark Robins on paper, if you give him enough time, could be the person to change it round, but I can sympathise with Stoke fans to a degree that if you're going to constantly underachieve over and over again, it's very difficult to get up for games, even if you're still going as a passionate, loyal supporter. So, yeah, 19th, I've gone for Stoke City. In 18th, I have gone for Portsmouth. Now, I would say from 18th upwards is really, I'm fairly reasonably confident with my bottom six. 18th until to probably about 11th or 12th. Literally, as a disclaimer, anyone can finish anywhere for me. But I'm going to go for Portsmouth in 8th position. Now, John Messino, we've got Annie, one of my championship co-hosts, on Carl's channel, Andy Harris, who's a Bristol City fan, great YouTuber, go and check him out. He mentioned a great point about John Messino that's been stuck in my head ever since he said it. John Messino has had to do two different types of jobs since he's gone to Portsmouth. He had to get a club that was underachieving, and again, like with Charlton, Portsmouth should be in the Championship, I think. He did well to get them into a winning machine regularly and getting them out of League One, getting them promoted. But at the same time, what he was also great at doing was adapting last season. And if you remember, yes, last season they started poorly, but they had fixtures like, Leeds away, Luton. Okay, Luton got relegated, but at the time they'd just been relegated from the Prem. Middlesbrough, Sunderland, West Brom. I think there was Sheffield United in there as well, Burnley. That's a very, very, very hard opening set of fixtures, and it was very tricky. But the thing for Portsmouth is that their home form last season was incredible. When you look at it, only of the top four, 3 of them failed to win at Fratton Park. Leeds lost their 1-0, and Burnley and Sheffield United both drew 0-0, and narrowly beat them at home as well, I might add. So Portsmouth is going to be a very tricky side. Obviously, Could second season syndrome be a thing? Possibly, but I just don't. I think with Fratton Park's crowd, I think Portsmouth will get too many points at home to be anywhere near the danger zone. And I wouldn't be surprised. I think Portsmouth will probably be closer to top half, possibly, than what I think they will be the relegation battle. The main signing I'm looking at that stands out to me is obviously John Swift from West Brom, who has obviously got a vast amount of experience in the Championship. So I think that's a really solid signing for them on a free. But yeah, I think John Messina, the problem that they're going to have, and a lot of people have mentioned this before, is that if John Messina keeps on doing this well for Pompey, then we're going to be at the point where clubs are going to be thinking, hang on a moment, this guy looks like he knows what he's on about, so let's see if we can go and get him. But for now, I'd say Portsmouth 18th, but I want to emphasise I would not be shocked if they finished a few positions higher. 17th, Watford. Now, in my notes, before I was trying to sort out my thoughts on who I thought was going to finish where, I wrote down one word: chaos. There's literally no other way to describe Watford, in my opinion. And I'm pretty sure even Watford fans are sick of constant changing of head coaches. The thing I'd say about Watford, and it's an interesting one, so their new head coach is Paolo Pezzolano. Now, Gino Pozzo, what can you say about him? Like, he's constantly sacking left, right and centre. There's no direct plan. Tom Cleverley, who I think did a pretty good job. I know the numbers, again, the form towards the back end of last season was poor, but in a season where a lot of people, and I saw quite a few people tip Watford to get relegated, or at the very least struggle down the bottom, I think he's still done a pretty decent job, if you ask me. So to sack him, I think, was a bit ridiculous. Obviously, I know, Tom Cleverley's since gone to Plymouth Argyle in League One. Yeah, I don't know. I find it hard to gauge much on Watford because a lot of the signings they make are ones that I'm not familiar with. I wouldn't be, and I know there's quite a few people. I know there's Nestroy Arankunda, I believe it is, who they've signed that could be quite decent. They've obviously spent a bit of money on him. Then you've got Vivaldo Semedo from Udinese. Of course, I think Udinese's Pozzo's sister club, I believe it is. Othmane Mama, I think it's how you call it, from Montpellier. So obviously there's a bit of money spent amongst those, but I don't know. Watford, I think I've seen a few podcasts describe Watford, and there's another club that I can fit into this description later on. But this is a weird one. With Watford, this is literally a club that I think could finish anywhere, and I wouldn't be totally shocked, apart from if it's in the top 5. So who knows? We'll wait and see. Watford defy the odds. Watford do a lot of crazy things. So Watford, for me, are incredibly hard to predict. But for now, I'm going for them to finish in 17th. Then we have, in 16th, we have Blackburn Rovers. Now, obviously with Blackburn, it's a funny one because the main problem with Blackburn is the Venkies. That's always the biggest issue. And until they progress, like with Sheffield Wednesday, as I said before, they, for me, Blackburn, are a club that should be competing to go to the top of the Premier League, top of the Championship, near the top of the Championship, to try to get into the Premier League. And until the Venkies go, I just think that's just not going to be on the cards for some time. But I'm looking at some of the players that they've signed. Sean McLaughlin from Hull City, looks okay-ish, I guess. Then you got Sidney Travares from Moriense. Oh, God, see, I told you I'm terrible pronouncing names. Yeah, but I mean, one of the biggest ones I've looked at they've lost, and I believe this is a player that Sunderland were loosely linked with in January, was Callum Britton, who's gone to Middlesbrough. That's a very good signing for Borough, but it's a pretty big loss for Blackburn, I think. But then I'm looking at experienced players like Danny Barr and Andres Weierman. Then Tyrese Dolan left as well. I think with these, but the big one for me is I think this season Blackburn are going to feel the loss of John Eustace more than they did at the end of last season. Obviously now, who ended up replacing Eustace when he left to go to Derby was Villarane Ismail, and I think it was a little bit of toxicity early on in Ismail's tenure. Now, obviously, had they beaten Sheffield United on the final day of last season, they would have got into the playoffs, but I get the impression there is going to be a bit of a drop-off. I think Blackburn really overachieved last season by finishing in 7th. And I just think this season we're going to see a drop-off. But again, like with Sheffield, so I think 16 for Blackburn, but like Sheffield, I think their fans do deserve to be better and the club should be competing higher than they are, to be honest. In 15th, this is the other club who could literally finish anywhere, and that is Queen's Park Rangers. Now, obviously, Julian Steffen is the next head coach who's gone in, replacing Marty Cifuentes, who ended up going at the end of last season. Obviously, there's still a couple of decent players there that I'm trying to look at. So I'm looking at, obviously, there was Elias Chair, Kwame Pogu, who was obviously signed from Peterborough, who looks to be pretty decent and probably deserves a chance in the Championship. Jake Salter, Steve Cook have got experience. Then there was another one. I've just tried to find it. Where was it? Yeah, Karamoko Dembele, who I believe is quite a highly rated young winger. again, it's a weird one. QPR have obviously got... Cifuentes is weird because last season there were two abject runs of form masked by a pretty good run of form down the middle of the season. But at the end, but I also think with QPR, they're going down a sort of a more youth model, which I know that a lot of clubs are starting to do now. So they need to keep a core of experience there. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that Blackburn, I think, will struggle a bit because they've lost Barton Wyman, who have experience. But anyway, back to QPR. Like with Watford, they're a club that could literally finish anywhere, and I wouldn't be too shocked. Some of the young players they had last season, I wouldn't be surprised if they develop into this season now they've had a year of championship experience. But again, I think with QPR, it seems to be a transition work in progress for me for the longer term. Time will tell whether it works or not. So 15th, I have gone for QPR. Now in 14th place, I have gone for Swansea City. Alan Sheehan is, again, goes into the sort of trait of a lot of head coaches that have had a bit of a sort of a interim period that it does really well, and that ends up getting them the job. Now, obviously, I think they ended last season really, really well. But I think when it comes to this season, some of the two players I recognise that they've signed are Cameron Burgess from Ipswich, which I think could be a decent signing, and Ethan Galbraith, who's very highly rated ex-Man United youngster who was at Leyton Orient last season. So Alan Sheehan is a weird one because the main reason I put Swansea in 14th is because I've got this feeling Alan Sheehan might fall into the trap of not doing and sort of being a victim of his own success towards the end of last season with his interim spell at Swansea. And I wouldn't be surprised if Alan Sheehan ends up getting the sack. But I really hope that I'm wrong on that, because it'd be nice to see someone who got the job on an interim basis be given a long-term position at the club and stay there for quite some time. Obviously, with Swansea, we become accustomed to hearing the Swansea way and stuff like that. But I think, obviously, a big loss for them that's left on a free is Harry Darling, who's obviously joined Liam Manning at Norwich, which we'll obviously get onto later. I think Swansea is sort of mid-table, but again, like with a few other clubs, if they finish a few positions higher, I wouldn't be totally surprised. And then into 13th place, right below the top half, which is Wrexham, the second of the promoted clubs. This is a weird one, because in my original predictions, when I did this with Ant a couple of weeks ago, Ant Leicester fan channel, by the way, go and subscribe, great content. I had Preston quite in like 18th. But bearing in mind, since that video, I think I'd realised they signed Lewis O'Brien, they've signed Connor Cody, they've signed Kiefer Moore, Josh Windass on a free, I think is a decent signing. Ryan Hardy, I really do like as a signing. I think with Wrexham, it's a weird one, because I think that some of the signings they've signed, I really do seem to like the look of, especially for a promoted club into the Championship. And I know that Wrexham's long-term ambition is to get into the Premier League, and I think with good reason. I think Wrexham are bigger than the leagues that they've been in over the last few years. But at the same time, I think some of their fans are going to be in for a little bit, not too much, but some of their fans, I think, need to be in for a bit of a reality check that they're not going to be the big fish in this league anymore. I think some of them will obviously already know that. But I think with Wrexham, they're going to find it quite tricky. They're going to find it trickier, much trickier, in fact, than what they have been in the last few years. Obviously, they were probably the biggest fish in the National League, among the biggest fish in League Two, and probably among them in League One even. And you could argue even the biggest fish if it weren't for Birmingham. But the biggest thing for me is Phil Parkinson. I'd be very surprised if... I think Phil Parkinson's kind of reached his peak now when it comes to Wrexham, and I think Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney are going to have to come to a decision on whether they believe he will be the best person for them longer term. To get to the Prem, they're going to need better, I think. But at the same time, I do really like the look of some of their signings. So I would say about 13th, and I think mid-table, pushing maybe top half for Wrexham, I think should be a decent, in my own opinion. And Wrexham fans, respectfully, let me know if you think that I'm not on the right track there. But for me, I think near top half or mid-table for Wrexham, for this point, should be a decent season, in my own personal opinion. But I can see Wrexham pushing and challenging for promotion within the next few years, for sure. So going into the top half now, this is where it probably gets more juicy and interesting, really, doesn't it? No disrespect to anyone who I put to be in the bottom half, because I still think the Championship's a mental league, even down the bottom. 12th, I've gone for Bristol City. Sorry, Annie. I've gone for Bristol City to sort of return back to their sort of mid-table mediocrity-ness, if that's even a phrase. Bristol City, obviously the big thing for them is losing Liam Manning, who's gone to Norwich. But I think with Gerard Struber, who's come in, I believe he had a spell at Barnsley a few years ago, which went a bit not great, but from what I can remember. But, I mean, the main signing I'm looking at, the one they've signed, obviously they've signed Joe Lumley from Southampton, Adam Randall from Plymouth Argyle. Emil Rees on a free from Preston, I think, is decent. I think it's a really decent sort of movement. I think that, obviously, Emil Reese is probably one of those that sort of physical strikers that has limitations, but knows how to get goals at this level. So I think that's always a big one. Obviously, he's probably going to be replacing the likes of Naki Wells, who's gone to Luton Town. But at the same time, I think with Bristol City, they obviously did excellently to get in the playoffs. I'm thinking of players like, but they've got players that I really do rate for this level. Max O'Leary, Rob Dickey, Scott Twine being another one of them, Max Bird. There's some players that I really, really do rate for this level. I just wonder with Giles Struber how different his style is going to be to Liam Manning and how long it'll take for Bristol City to adapt to that sort of philosophy. Or change in philosophy, I should say. That's probably a better word. But I think Bristol City, for them, top half, I think is okay. Obviously, I know Andy's at the point where he wants to be regularly progressing to get into the playoffs. But it's just a matter of steadily building. So obviously they need to keep on going, because I do think some of the progress they've been making has been really, really good. But we'll just have time will tell. We'll have to wait and see how well Struber does at Ashton Gate. Right, 11th. Now, this is another club, like with Wrexham initially, when I was doing the predictions with Ant on Ant's channel, that was pretty low actually on my predictions. I think I had them somewhere like 18th or 19th. But then since then, I think I'm thinking about who the manager is and some of the signings they've made, and Derby County. Now, Derby County for me are going to be 11th. John Eustace for me probably arguably did one of the best jobs of the season at two different clubs last year. With Blackburn, when they've lost Sammy Smodics, he had them competing in the playoffs, and I think they were in the playoffs when he left to go to Derby County, obviously, of course, and that was a big gamble when Derby were in the relegation zone at the time. But there you go. But since then, he obviously did keep them up and did really well. When you look at the Derby squad he had, it wasn't really that good on paper. But some of the signings they've made, I'm really a big fan of. Carlton Morris, I don't think enough people are talking about this. I'm a big fan of Carlton Morris, and I think at Derby County, I think it's a really, really good acquisition for them. Danny Bart, obviously, as a Sunderland fan, we know what he's about. He's as experienced as they come. He knows John Eustace from his time at Blackburn. The same with Andres Weimann. I think that's a really, really good signing for them. Patrick Agimang? Sorry, I think is how you say it. From Charlotte, I think is one that's obviously been talked about a fair bit from what I've seen amongst Championship content creators and obviously be among Derby County fans, I am sure. The one signing I think is very intriguing, and I'm keen to see how he gets on, is Ryan Brewster, who obviously left Sheffield United at the end of last season after the playoff final and ended up at Derby County. Now, I think with Sheffield United, there was always a pressure on him because of the price tag that Sheffield United paid to Liverpool for his services. On a free at Derby, I think, and although he did well for Sheffield United, or at least decent last season, I think a move away probably was what he needed. A fresh start, somewhere where a price tag's not going to hang over his head. He's joined for free, and I think for Derby, considering they were in League One just over 18 months ago, I think this is pretty decent. And I think John Eustace, I'm a big, big fan of John Eustace. So yeah, I think Derby County will have a really good season. I think if you offer Derby fans top half, I think a lot of them would probably take it. Just ask Ryan Gilks and Justin Peach on the second tier podcast, and you can see what their thoughts are. But there we go. Now, top 10 time. Here we go. This is where I'm going to be really keen to see what people think. 10th, I've gone for Millwall. Now, Millwall are kind of the club that seems to be constantly pushing on the periphery of the playoffs, apart from season before last. But if you look in 22-23, they really should have finished in the playoffs. So the position they were in, throwing a 3-1 lead at home to Blackburn Rovers on the final day, which of course allowed Sunderland to sneak in at their expense. And obviously maybe there was a hangover from that in the next season, where they ended up finishing, I think it was something like lower mid-table or barely pushing top half. But then last season, of course, Alex Neil ended up coming in mid-season after Neil Harris left and was unlucky really in the end. They only just missed out on the final day of the playoffs. So, but obviously going away to Burnley, who were unbeaten last season at home, was a pretty big ask. Josh Coburn, who was on loan from Middlesbrough, has been made permanently. I believe it was £5 million they paid for him. Obviously replaces Zian Fleming, who's joined Burnley on a permanent since they got promoted to the Prem. But I like the look of Masemo Luongo from Ipswich on a free. I think that's a really sensible signing, and it'd be the sort of signing Alex Neil likes. Alfie Doughty from Luton. I think, again, another really solid addition for Alex Neil at the Den. And look, whatever my feelings are towards Alex Neil, everyone who's watched this channel long enough knows how I feel about the guy, but moving about the way he walked out on Sunderland for Stoke. But having said that, he is the biggest reason that I'm a very, very big believer that I think Millwall will actually be pushing hard for the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got in them either. Alex Neil's a good tactical guy, he knows what he's on about, he knows this division inside out, and I think it's one where you get a vibe of whether certain managers or head coaches suit certain clubs, and I think Alex Neil suits Millwall down to the ground in a good way for them. So Millwall I've got in 10th. Now in 9th place I have got West Bromwich Albion. Last season, obviously for West Brom, didn't go as well and didn't go well in the end. Obviously, Carlos Corberán was obviously a big factor for West Brom and where they were amongst the playoff picture. He obviously then left to go to Valencia, I think it was. And then Tony Mowbray comes in for a second spell, which doesn't go very well, and then West Brom season peters out. Now, saying that, Ryan Mason has come in. Now, Ryan Mason, I believe, was head coach of Hull? Am I going to say Hull not too long ago? I get him. Oh, no, maybe. No, sorry, I'm telling a lie. He played for Hull. It was Tottenham he was head coach of not long ago. But West Brom's squad, again, I always find it quite interesting. So, Josh Griffiths, Joe Wildsmith in goal. You got Callum Styles, who apparently didn't do too badly for West Brom last season. I like the signing of Nat Phillips from Liverpool. Daniel Furlong, obviously still there. Tom Fellows, at the time of speaking, is still there. Josh Madger, Daryl Dike, Colin Grant, Mickey Johnston, Jed Wallace. And Alex Mowat. When you look at some of the players there, there's still more than enough there to mount, for me, a playoff challenge if put in the right system with the right sort of people around them. Obviously, Ryan Mason's a big one because of how he's going to adapt to the Championship, and how long it'll take for him to implement his style on West Brom. I wouldn't be surprised if West Brom finish a few places lower, but I've just got a good feeling that I think they'll be pushing for right below the playoff picture. So West Bromwich Albion in 9th. Then in 8th place we have Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough's a fascinating one. Well, obviously, not long at the time of speaking, they've not long made the signing of Callum Britton from Blackburn at right back, who I think is a really good addition for them. Other signings include Archie Baptiste from Tottenham on a free, Alfie Jones from Hull City, Abdoulaye Kante from Troyes. Obviously Josh Coburn was sold to Millwall. Obviously, at the time of speaking, Middlesbrough and 2 other clubs were in talks for Chuba Akpom. If Akpom comes back to Borough, I think that's an exceptional signing. Because you could argue they haven't replaced Latte Lat since Latte Lat was sold. But I think Akpom coming in to compete alongside Tommy Conway, who I really do rate at Championship level for the number one spot up front, or number 9 spot rather, in the Championship, is I think should be two very good options. And you're looking as well, like Hayden Hackney obviously is a big one if Hayden Hackney stays for them, because he often makes them tick in the middle of the park. You have Finn Azaz there as well. You have Morgan Whittaker. Both of them should know each other really well from their Plymouth days and should do really well for Middlesbrough, to be truthful. Obviously, at centre-back, you got Van der Berg there. You got, who was the guy they had from Ipswich? George Edmondson, I think it was, last season they made permanent. So, I'm looking at Borough's squad, and while I've always maintained that I believe people overrated Borough's squad a bit too highly in terms of thinking they'll push for top 2, I still believe that Borough should have more than enough to make sure that they will be competing for the playoffs. And obviously the big factor is Rob Edwards. Now, I've seen a lot of people put Rob Edwards' appointment down, and personally I'm not too sure why. I know his last 6 months at Luton were absolutely terrible, don't get me wrong, there's no getting away from that, but something must have happened behind the scenes for that to have gone drastically wrong, and I think the players have got to take a lot of responsibility in that regard. But for me, I think Rob Edwards is a better appointment than people make out to be. Just because his last 6 months at Luton were terrible doesn't mean you can just eradicate everything that happened before that. He got Luton Town promoted to the Premier League. I want to repeat that. He got Luton Town promoted to the Premier League, and they didn't disgrace themselves within the Premier League either, when they would have by far had the lowest budget. Because although they would have had Premier League money and parachute payments, a lot of that went on their new stadium. So they wouldn't have been in a much better position here. So I've got a good feeling Rob Edwards will do better than people think. Ultimately, whether Borough will be happy with 8th, I don't know. I suspect they probably won't be. But yeah, I think Borough for 8th. I think Rob Edwards will do better than what people think he will. So in 8th, I've got Middlesbrough. Now 7. Now this club, I would not be surprised if they finished in the playoffs, but my gut says they'll just miss out, and that is Birmingham City, the last of the promoted clubs. Now, you've got to hand it to Birmingham. To be fair, some of the business they have done has been really, really impressive and eye-catching to me. James Beadle got lots of experience in the Championship on loan from Brighton. Tommy Doyle, who I think is their best signing personally so far this window, but there's reasons to believe other players could step up. Then you're looking at Kyogo from Rennes, who I believe was at Celtic, and Celtic didn't want to get rid of him, I don't think. Jamari Gray, I know he's obviously getting on a bit, but I think in age, but I still think he should be good enough to contribute at Championship level. And then you're looking at on quickly for Derby County, by the way, forgot to mention that Dion Sanderson going there is a decent signing for Derby. Just to put that out there for a disclaimer. But either way, look, I think, and then you've got Ethan Laird at right back. You've got Jay Stansfield up front. In addition to the signings that they've made, I think there's some real, there is some proper Championship quality within Birmingham City's squad. Now, why have I got them to finish in 7th. I think people slightly overestimate Birmingham's chances a little bit, because I think there are clubs above them who I think have probably done some really good business as well, and I like the look of some of the things that they have done, whether it be a managerial or head coach appointment or some of the business or some of the signings they've made. But I think Birmingham, if they finish in the playoffs, wouldn't be a shock to me, because Chris Davis, obviously you look at the budget and the squad they had last season, people go, well, they should have won the league by that much anyway, but come on, to get to 111 points is pretty good going, to be fair. I don't think, you can't not give him credit for that, I don't think. Obviously, Birmingham are going to have to be careful from a PSR perspective within the next couple of years. Maybe not right now, but if they don't get promoted in the next couple of years, they're going to have to watch what they end up doing. But for right now, you cannot accuse Birmingham of not going for it. And I think Birmingham will, and I can't blame Birmingham fans for getting excited. I think this is going to be a very interesting campaign. I think Birmingham will be right up there, challenged for the playoffs, but I think will just miss out. And I think they'll end up getting 7th place. Now, top 6 time. Here we go. Let's see what people think. In 6th place, we have Norwich City. Obviously, Liam, one of the biggest things I like about this is Liam Manning. I think Liam Manning going to Norwich from Bristol City, I think, is a really, really good one. I know there's obviously debate about saying it was a sideways move, given how Norwich finished so many places below Bristol City. But the way I kind of look at it is I think that Norwich are historically more at the top end of the Championship in recent times, more than Bristol City have been. But Liam Manning, I think, is a really good coup for Norwich. Someone who's got Championship experience, someone who's had a few years at this level, and obviously some of the business they've done is really good. So Jeffrey Schlupp on a free from Palace, I think is decent for experience for them with a young squad. Harry Darling, I really do like at this level. Jacob Wright, who did really well for them at the end of last season, has been snapped up permanently. Obviously, you've got Vladan Kovacevic from Sporting. If I've got that right, I'm very proud of myself there. Obviously replacing the outgoing Angus Gunn, who left on a free at the end of last season. Daniel Grimshaw, another goalkeeper from Plymouth, who will be number 2 there, I would imagine. Matthias Kvistgarden, been really highly rated from what I can see. Papa Amadou Diallo, who I believe they were competing with Watford for, and they managed to beat Watford to him. Mirko Topic, the tank engine, as Chris Reeve calls him, which is quite funny. But I've got a good vibe about Norwich. Obviously, they've sold Bor. Obviously, Johnny Rose left permanently now. Borja Sainz has left, so that's money coming in to the club, which they've since reinvested. And I think, like with Birmingham, I think Norwich are giving it a really good go to try and get themselves into the top 6. And I think for Norwich, it's fair for them to expect. It's fair for them to expect to be trying to push in for the playoffs. Last season, their squad really underachieved, and I think it was clear to see that Johannes Hoff-Turup had really lost favour with the squad by that point. Obviously, the big thing for Norwich is Josh Sargent and whether he stays or not. I'm kind of hinging it at the minute on the fact that Sargent is there, but even without him, I think there's going to be a lot of I think there's going to be players that, again, like I said earlier with QPR, because a lot of Norwich players that were younger players when they signed them, it means now that I think that in their second season they've got a bit of experience behind them, and I think Norwich will surprise a few people this season actually. So. But yeah, I like the look of what Norwich are doing, and the biggest reason is I like Liam Manning. To go through what he's been through on a personal level in the last year, and to still carry on, get Bristol City in the playoffs, speaks volumes of the guy's character. And I think with Norwich, I think he'll finish in the playoffs again. So 6th place, Norwich City. Now, this top 5 I've been quite sure on for a while. It's just a matter of the order. But here goes. 5th place, I have got Frank Lampard and Coventry City. What is there to say about Coventry? I think obviously the big thing for Coventry is whether they start well or not. That's always going to be the big thing for them. But I think, to be fair, if you're just looking at it, if they do start well, I would be very surprised. In fact, I'd be outright astonished if Coventry didn't finish in the top 6. Looking at some of one of the biggest pieces of business that they've done is obviously Kane Kessler-Hayden from Aston Villa, who I believe was Preston's player of the season last year. So that's obviously really good. I know it could be replacing the potentially outgoing Van Elwick. Carl Rushworth, obviously from Brighton and Hove Albion, which is obviously going to be really going to be pretty decent for them. Obviously, you've got Carl Rushworth from Brighton. Sorry, ignore the lighting change there. And yeah, but I don't think there's that much that needed. I don't think there's that much really that needed changing, because I'm looking at some of their squad. I'm looking at obviously Kessler-Hayden at right back, Jay De Silva at left back. Then you've obviously got Liam Kitchen, Bobby Thomas, who I don't think are bad players. Carl Rushworth on loan from Brighton. Their midfield I really like though. Matt Grimes, Ben Sheaf, and Jack Radoni I think are really good, really stand out players. Sakamoto, Mason Clark on the wings, and up front, I still insist, if you play to Ellis Sim's strength, there is a good player in there. But had you right, Thomas Asante, that squad for a non-parachute team is oozing with quality, in my opinion. And for me, I think that Coventry will get 5th place, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a fairly comfortable one either. They played really well against Sunderland last season, in my opinion, especially in the second leg. Obviously, Lampard needs to work out when teams figure out tactically, get a better of him tactically, like the Breeze did. But I think Coventry will be right up there, and I think they will end up finishing in 5th place. Really do like them, really fancy their chances this season. 4th place, I've gone for Sheffield United. Now, obviously, the big thing from Sheffield United's point of view, well, first of all, they've lost Kiefer Moore, Ahmed Hozic, and Vinny Souza. Ahmed Hozic and Vinny Souza have obviously been well compensated for, so that should give them some funds to reinvest. They've obviously, I think they've obviously loaned in Louis Barry, who I do like from Aston Villa, to be fair. The biggest thing for me is, obviously, Hamza Chowdhury's gone back to Leicester as well, but the biggest thing for me is that Chris Wilder's obviously gone. Now, everyone knows my thoughts on Chris Wilder, and I still stand by that. I think Sheffield United's performances last season were heavily masked by the results, and I do believe finishing on 92 points was massively flattering to them, because I feel a lot of the games that I watched of them, they were basically have individuals bail them out and to mask abject performances to often win games they didn't deserve to. And for me, it's one thing where Sheffield United need to improve this season is results against the top sides. Because I'm looking at Chris Wilder's record against the other teams in the top 4, all the teams who went up in Leeds, in Burnley, and in Sunderland. So, including the Championship playoff final, out of 7 games, he won 1, which was a very lucky, in my opinion, 1-0 win against Sunderland at Bramall Lane. Lost to Sunderland at the Stadium of Light and lost to Sunderland in the playoff final at Wembley in our biggest high-pressure situation game. Then, obviously, Leeds and Burnley both did the double over Sheffield United. Now, as Ruben Sayers coming in, I actually think, like with Rob Edwards, I think Ruben Sayers will actually do pretty well at Sheffield United if they can adapt to the way he wants to play. I think obviously they need to have a discernible style of play, which I think in turn will end up getting decent results for them, or should, because if Gus Hamer is still there, I think that's a really good option there. I think Harrison Burrows, I'm a big fan of. Michael Cooper, I think is one of the best keepers, if not the best in the Championship. Sidney Peck, Arblaster still there. Tyrese Campbell still there. The biggest thing for me is they need to sort out the centre-backs, though, because obviously Ahmed Hozic is gone, and I'm not a fan of Jack Robinson. I think he's far too slow, he's far too error-prone. I think that Merienda's got the better of him both times when he's played against him, the last 2 times Sunderland played Sheffield United. But I do believe that Sheffield United, with having the money they're getting from Ahmed Hozic and Vinny Souza, I believe will have enough to adequately replace them at Championship level. And I do believe Sheffield United will finish in 4th place. Now we're getting into 3rd. Now, I want to stress, as of right now, I'm making this video on the assumption that they get a points deduction here. In 3rd, I've gone for Leicester City. Now, when I was talking to Ant off air, actually, after we did a video, I'm looking at some of their squad. So Mats Hermansen, look, let's take out Mats Hermansen for a minute, because the only signing they've made is Asmir Begovic. Jacob Stolisic, I think is how you say it. Now, apparently he came from the youth academy, and Ant rates him to be number 1 choice to replace Hermansen. So say you've got Stolisic and Begovic, 2 decent. If Ant's right about Jacob, then I think that's going to be 2 decent options in goal. But you're looking at some of the players here: Harry Suter, Ricardo Ferreira, Ben Nelson, James Justin. Wilfred Ndidi is obviously going to go. Harry Winks, Hamza Chowdhury, Oliver Skip, Kelsey Makatia, then Fatawu, Mavididi, Bobby Reed, Jordan Ayew. This squad is absolutely insane. A lot of the players names I've just mentioned for this league should be absolutely insane and criminal. It should be a criminal offence to have them at this level, and there'll be players I've forgotten. Marty Cifuentes going, obviously, I think is a very, very decent option for Leicester. I thought for sure for a long time Danny Rowe was going to go to the King Power. The only reason, literally, that I haven't got them in the top 2 is because I'm assuming that a points deduction is on the way. But I want to stress this: if Leicester don't get a points deduction, they jump up into 2nd place for me. Maybe even first to compete for the title. But I think there's not much more to say. I think Leicester, obviously, we know what's happening with the situation, with their PSR issues and off-field stuff. They've obviously put an offer in for Josh Brownhill at the time of recording, and I think if they get Josh Brownhill, I think that is a superb signing for them, especially on a free. Obviously, you'll have agents' fees, signing on fees and stuff like that. But yes, I think that Josh Brownhill will be an excellent signing if they pull it off. But yes, the only reason I've got them in 3rd is because of the points deduction. If they don't have it, they make at least 2nd for me. In 2nd place, we have gone for Will Still and Southampton. Now, Will Still's a funny one, because obviously, I wonder how he feels about rejecting Sunderland a year ago, when he went to Lens apparently for European football, and I believe they got knocked out in the qualifiers. But either way, when you look at some of the... Obviously, the big thing with Southampton is, are they going to react well to having 12 points last season? I think they will. I still think that their squad on paper looks really, really good for this level. Obviously, you're looking at the likes of Matthias Fernandes, you've got Tyler Dibbling, but obviously there's links to Everton at the time of speaking, which by the end of the window might have happened. But even then, I'm still looking at Flynn Downs. I'm a big fan of at Championship level. I think Harwood Bellis is still there. Again, will he still be there by the end of the window? We don't know. Will he still be there like that? Then we have Gavin Banzunu, who did well for them last time in the Championship. But the front three is what I'm really excited about. Brereton Diaz, Adam Armstrong, and Cameron Archer. If you get them cohesively going as a front three, that should be filthy at Championship level. The biggest reason that I say that if Leicester don't get a points deduction, that I think Southampton end up finishing in third place is because I don't know how well Will Still will adapt to the Championship, and how much the players will adapt to the way he wants to play. How long will it take? It's the first time he's managed in England, but he obviously has managed in a fair few different clubs, but he's obviously highly rated for a reason, and I think with the squad he's got, though, I think the Parachute... I can't get away from the fact the Parachute team should be much better than most of the other teams in this division. So, but as of right now, I think personally, Southampton at the minute, if Leicester get a points deduction, will have enough to finish ahead of them in second, depending on the points deduction. If not, I think Southampton will get third, though. So, but we'll wait and see what happens with that one. Leicester's points deduction determines the Leicester and Southampton's positions for me. And in first place, we have Kieran McKenna and Ipswich Town. Now, for me, Ipswich's squad, the last time they were in the Championship, really shouldn't have finished ahead of Leeds and Southampton, even though there were some very good players within that setup. I'm thinking of Luongo, Wes Burns, Nathan Broadhead, Connor Chaplin. George Hurst was serviceable for them up front. Kiefer Moore obviously on loan there. Leif Davis was still there. So yeah, there's obviously some really good players there. But I'm looking at the squad they've got now, and how they deal with being the favourites is going to be very interesting. But off the top of my head, at the minute they've still got Amari Hutchinson. But let's assume for a minute that Amari Hutchinson moves amongst links to Brentford. You've obviously got Muric, who they signed from Burnley a year ago. Cedric Akipre, Leif Davis, Ashley Young, some good valuable experience there. Jacob Greaves is still there. Jaro O'Shea's still there. Jack Taylor, who's a really underrated midfielder for Ipswich, actually. Then you've got Wes Burns still there. Connor Chaplin, Jaden Philogene, Og Bene, who was former Rotherham and Luton. Sammy Spoddix, Nathan Broadhead, Jack Clark. There's some really, really good top draw players. I do get the impression with Ipswich last season, they kind of signed for this coming season, 25-26, rather than staying up in 24-25, which Kieran Maguire on the Second Tier podcast, I think, expertly put. But the biggest thing for me, they've still got Kieran McKenna. Now, if Kieran McKenna goes, that might change things a bit. I think Ipswich could still do with another midfielder and could still maybe do with another striker, because obviously to replace Liam Delap, that was always going to be the case. George Hurst, not convinced he's going to be good enough to start for them up front every week in the Championship. But again, Birmingham were, like with Middlesbrough and Birmingham, who I forgot to mention before, linked with Chuba Akpom. If Ipswich get Chuba Akpom, I think that's a really, really good signing for them up front. And I'll say this for Kieran McKenna from a Sunderland hat on. If he does not get the best, and by that I mean play him in his actual position in Jack Clark, who should be a cheat code at this level, then that's very questionable. Very, very questionable. But yes, I'm liking the look of Ipswich this season. I'm really, really liking the look of it. So, yeah, I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited to see what happens with Ipswich. And obviously the big thing will be, like I said, is how they're going to deal with being the favourites. But I think if Kieran McKenna stays especially, and they keep most of their squad, even if Hutchinson goes, they've got more than enough to at least finish in the top 4 in the Championship and probably even top 2 win the league. If Leicester don't get a points deduction, I wouldn't bet against Leicester winning the division. But I think Ipswich will finish in the top 2 this season. So there you go, guys. That is it. That is my predictions. So as you can see, tempted to try and give off the illusion I know what I'm talking about. So let's quickly go through the rest of the predictions very quickly before I wrap this video up. So we have got in 24th, Sheffield Wednesday, 23rd, Hull City, 22nd, Preston, 21st, Oxford United, 20th, Charlton Athletic, 19th, Stoke City, 18th, Portsmouth, 17th, Watford, 16th, Blackburn, 15th, QPR, 14th, Swansea, 13th, Wrexham, 12th, Bristol City, 11th, Derby County, 10th, Millwall, 9th, West Brom, 8th, Middlesbrough, 7th, Birmingham, and then the top 6 in this order from 6th to 1st for me for the 25-26 Championship season are Norwich in 6th, Coventry 5th, Sheffield United 4th, if they get a points deduction, Leicester 3rd, Southampton 2nd and Ipswich 1st. But if Leicester don't get a points deduction, then Leicester jump into the top 2 for me. There you go, guys. That was my attempt at attempting to try and get this video interesting to predict the Championship. Hopefully I've given enough of a rationale. Obviously I won't know the situation at every single club, but I have attempted to try to be a bit balanced. But yeah, what do you guys think? Respectfully comment below what you think. What are your predictions? You don't have to put the whole 24, just top 6 and bottom 3 will suffice. But I'm keen to see what people end up saying. Anyway, guys, if you're watching the video and you think I've earned a sub from you after watching, and you're not subbed already, that would be really appreciated because I'm trying to get 7k. And what do you guys think below? Comment respectfully, share the video around. It'd be much appreciated. And yeah, I can't wait for the Championship. It's going to be a bonkers league, and I can't wait to continue talking about it this season. And yeah, stay safe and take care, everyone.